Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar entitled Solving Two Key Issues, Managing Remote Workers on Citrix and VMware Horizon. My name is John Grant from Goliath Technologies. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here. I'm also joined by my colleague, Joe Lacalandra, who is one of our Senior Client Success Managers here at Goliath Technologies. So the two of us are going to be your hosts for today's session. So again, thank you everyone for joining. Real quickly, a few housekeeping items before we get into things. Two quick comments. One is that over the course of the session, while we're talking about this topic, remote working and the challenges associated with it, please feel free to submit questions to clarify anything that's said, or if there's specific areas that are of particular interest to you, please submit those in the chat on the lower right-hand side. Also know that at the very end, there's going to be a survey. Just a couple very brief questions. Takes all of about 5 seconds, literally, and that will be at the end. Finally, there will be a recording available after today's session. So if you'd like to share it, or if you missed something, got pulled away perhaps during the session, you can catch up that way and get a link automatically in your email from the webinar afterwards. All right, let's get right into the topic at hand and talk a little bit about the agenda and how we're going to talk about it. In terms of talking about remote work, the best way to tackle this topic, because there's so many things that so many organizations have been impacted, is really to look at specific examples. And so today's webinar is going to focus really on one of our customers, Empire Office, and we're going to start with the what in terms of identifying what was the challenge that impacted Empire Office, what made it difficult during their expansion of Citrix to support remote users. And there's two in particular we'll talk about. Next, we'll talk about why this became an issue and why it became so challenging for them to support this kind of a rollout, specifically for their remote users. And then finally, we'll talk, Joe is going to talk about how Empire Office solved both of these issues with purpose-built technology. And then finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A from the submitted questions, although we may be able to work a few in along the way as well, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Okay, why don't we get into the what of what's taking place. For this, I'm going to hand it off to Joe, Joe Lacalandra, who's going to talk a little bit about this. Having worked in his role, he works directly with customers, and so gets a front row seat to experiencing some of the challenges that were brought about by COVID and just day-to-day operations of managing Citrix in general. So, Joe, do you want to take the floor?
Sure. Thanks, John. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. And as John talked about, the theme of today's webinar will be about managing users working from home. And we are going to focus the story and the content about our customer, Empire Office, located out of New York City, Manhattan. And there's certain challenges that they faced, and their IT team specifically faced when forced to move everyone remotely because of COVID-19 last March. So the challenges that we're going to talk about today on today's call, they're not unique to Empire Office, and I'm sure many of you that are have registered or attended today's call face these or something similar to these over the past 18 months as we all work through the new normal. But thankfully for Empire Office, they had already invested in a platform such as Citrix, which made that transition, moving everyone from the office to home, a lot easier. However, many of their users were working remotely for the first time, and management was concerned about how effective employees could be while not in the office. And with that, they also wanted to make sure that they were able to best support those employees. And to do that, they needed visibility into performance, which is something they didn't have with any of their current set of IT tools, whether that be other products or the Citrix free tools. And essentially, the IT department was asked to find a way to track and report on how productive these users were working from home, and they didn't have any answers for management. So they came to us here at Goliath, and we were, what we plan to talk to you about on today's call is how they were able to identify two key issues really within minutes of deploying our technology. So one, which users were having trouble and needed support from working from home, and two, which users were having low productivity because of IT issues. So we're going to get into all that and why, but we actually want to hear from you all first. We have a poll question that we're going to share out now. We'd love to hear from you. Have you been asked for this type of data before about Citrix productivity or user, employee productivity using Citrix from home? Please share with us, yes or no, with the poll on the screen right now.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, Joe, we just this week I was on with a customer at a large insurance company that started to get requests from almost every single business unit in the company into IT asking for this kind of visibility, considering everyone was remote. A lot of businesses had to shift organizationally to a model of being able to manage employees of various skill sets and competencies remotely. It's not easy. And so as a result of that, and the fact that you can't walk down the hallway to someone's cubicle anymore, they have started to request a lot of this information just so that they can keep tabs on it, have analytics, and like Joe was just talking about, know who they need to help, who's having issues with productivity, and then they can and then trying to understand whether those issues were because of, well, laziness, or whether they were because of an IT issue or some other complicating factor. So that was the kind of thing that they were hoping to get. Those were the two key issues they were encountering, and the reality that without that information, it becomes really difficult to effectively manage that as an executive in the modern workplace.
And with the state of the world now, these requests are not going anywhere. So this is definitely a hot topic and something that's going to continue, I think, in the near future at least.
Right. Yeah. So okay. So it looks like about a third of the folks on the session today have gotten this kind of request. Some haven't. I will add this one. I'll come back to this in a moment. And we'll talk. This obviously is the topic, one of the major topics today we're talking about. So why don't we continue on here? And in the next slide here, it addresses the why this was such a challenge. Why was this such an issue? Because we all know that there are free tools that come with the technology, that come with the Citrix platform. There are also legacy server network monitoring technologies and the like. But none of those technologies, or really any other technology in the marketplace, that's software, analytics, monitoring, call it what you want, it doesn't have the ability to do this, which is report on through Citrix, when in a Citrix session or a VMware Horizon session, what the actual productivity or activity is. Now, Director has something close to it, where they pull forward a Citrix state designation. If you look at the first one of the first sub bullets there. But that's built for infrastructure handling, and it automatically times out. It doesn't track, keep a consistent historical record of the actual activity level, just because it wasn't built for that. There's a number of good articles, by the way, on the Citrix Ready and the Citrix blogs that talk about this in a lot of detail. So you can't really get a true indication of how active or productive users are being in their Citrix sessions beyond the fact that they did log in. So the first issue there under why they couldn't analyze it is because they didn't have the visibility with the right metrics. The second one was that even if they did, those technologies don't track that data historically. The Citrix state designation even, and those metrics. So really, there's a chronic shortage of options in terms of being able to analyze what productivity is like in Citrix sessions, and being able to track that historically. The second one was the question of why aren't they able to be productive? What information can we tell about that? Is there someone that needs help, either from management or from IT, or is it someone where there's some other things going on that should be considered? The first one is they were looking for a way where in the technology they could actually quickly answer both questions, which is something I think that Joe's going to hit on in a little bit when he talks about how they were able to solve this. Being able to quickly take into account potential performance issues that could be driving productivity and activity inside of a Citrix session, in addition to the other variables. And then finally, user behavior. Being able to actually drill in and get details around what they were doing inside of a session, and break out ICA subchannels and the applications being used and things of that nature. So you really have a complete authoritative picture about what's taking place so that you can make the right decisions. And so those are the reasons why they weren't able to solve them with any of the legacy technologies. And when they were moving forward with Goliath, which Joe will get into in just a minute, one of the important things that mattered to them was the fact that Citrix actually acknowledges a lot of this and recommends it. Recommends the use of a third-party technology to, as the tagline says, providing seamless user experience with Citrix and Goliath. There's a video here. We're not going to play it on this session, but it is going to be on the. It is available in the on the landing page, and it's available. We can provide it afterwards. Where Citrix goes through this in about a 2.5-minute video. You can see it on the screen that explains why environments leveraging remote users and leveraging enterprise environments of really any scale need a technology that is purpose-built for this to provide a complete end-to-end view and take all the things into account that the Citrix tools just weren't built for, in terms of just looking at certain things within Citrix and performance. So I would definitely recommend that, but I think it says something that Citrix, that this is meaningful enough that they've recommended that. Now the next thing is just to represent quickly the Goliath solution. What was actually being brought to bear? We've sort of been a little bit cryptic, I think, as we've talked about this going through the first couple minutes. What they were looking for to fill that gap is exactly what you see listed on that slide. A purpose-built technology built to give you an end-to-end view that has embedded intelligence, integration, deep integration with Citrix to get the right data and information and intelligence so that you have a complete view of what's impacting your users' experience. And then have the ability to do the things that you see in those 3 columns. Anticipate issues with purpose-built, out-of-the-box alerting, looking for failure points that can drive user issue. Troubleshooting data where you have both real-time analysis of user sessions, their experience, their performance, quickly knit together, as well as historical data, and then have all this data available in a easy-to-consume way that's both broad to impact everything that you drive user experience, as well as deep to get you the right answers. And finally, document this and track all of this historically, and use that data in a number of different ways, whether it's through the out-of-the-box reports or through integration with other technologies where we can send our data along to support another enterprise business intelligence or monitoring technology or anything like that as well. So, Joe, do you want to go in a little bit how Empire specifically, what steps they specifically took to solve these kinds of issues and how things played out from there?
Sure, and as John mentioned, Empire used our purpose-built software that has embedded intelligence and automation. That's how they were able to solve those 2 big issues. And really, they were able to deploy our technology very fast and very easily, under 2 hours. And with our simplistic and straightforward approach to implementation and architecture, we immediately began collecting deep user experience issues and productivity metrics within minutes, as well as applying our embedded intelligence and automation across the IT infrastructure. That way, the IT team at Empire actually had an ability to be proactively notified of any potential issues with user experience or the Citrix infrastructure. And having that data now, they began scheduling what we're going to show you, the end user productivity report, in just 2 minutes. It gave them insight into how users' work habits had perhaps changed, or perhaps differently, working from home, and help them answer those 2 questions. Again, 1, were users having trouble and did they need support working from home? And 2, which users were having low productivity actually because of IT issues? So this user productivity report that we're going to talk about and show you on today's webinar instantly became a big hit internally at Empire Office. It was widely used across the business by department heads and managers, whether it was sales, marketing, or finance. And with the data, it was really easy for them to see which users' productivity had suffered with true and accurate measurements of end user experience and interaction from a historical perspective, not just real time. And they could also see which applications and desktops were being used. And for IT, this provided them with a deeper visibility into user performance that they didn't even know existed prior. So what we'd like to do is actually show you exactly what the team at Empire Office was able to leverage once we had the technology deployed. So we're actually going to jump into the live IT environment now. And what you're looking at on my screen here is our Citrix virtual apps and desktops real-time and historical session display. So in this one view, the team at Empire Office were able to see all of their active and in use sessions, as well as being able to query previous dates and look at all of their historical data as well too. And from this main screen, they were really able to identify two main things. Number one, you're able to see deep user experience analytics end to end across the infrastructure and being able to correlate them quickly. And as I mentioned before, number two, deep details that are tracked historically without having to average or roll up them. So you can see some high level details on this screen here. Why don't we just take a quick look at an actual user session just to give you an idea of the type of data we're collecting.
Joe, could you zoom in a little bit as well? By the way, everyone on the session, I just did this on my end. There's a button here on the right-hand side. You can zoom in on your GoToMeeting panel as well. In the event the text is a little bit too small. This is not a software product for ants, right? Joe, you want to take back over? I know obviously size is not an issue for text on your end, so.
Not a problem. And let me know if this is a little bit better now. Sorry about that. You know, going from different monitors to monitors, resolution, gotta love the real-time live view here. I think we're
working from home really does add a few more wrinkles, doesn't it, Joe?
All right, here we go. So as we were saying, let's actually just to give you an idea of the type of user experience data and analytics that we're collecting. Here's just a little bit of insight into how we're able to look into user experience historically and from an end-to-end perspective. So the session that we're looking at here, and maybe we can zoom in a little bit more, you can actually see is from August 17th. So this session was from 9 days ago. And as you can see, all of the data is kept intact here. You're able to see the user's logon time. You're able to see what server they connected in from. Were they remote? Were they internal? Did they connect through a NetScaler storefront? And we're able to see those deep user experience metrics, both from an ICA and connectivity perspective, as well as from the infrastructure. So the team was able to get all the information they needed about user experience and productivity right from this one screen.
And this was a session 9 days ago, right?
Exactly. And as you can see, the data is not touched. It's still intact. So again, they can go back and look historically and view a user's experience and see exactly what was happening for that end user at that point in time. So, and having all this great data is great to be able to troubleshoot, great to be able to look at, but the real use case for Empire Office was reporting. They wanted to be able to report on this data and have it historically and really get an insight into user experience and user productivity. So they were able to create a report within 2 minutes right from our easy to use reporting wizard here. So they clicked on report at the top of the screen here, and what they're able to see is a list of available reports down here. And you're able to, again, schedule these, send them off to different people, different parts of the business whenever you'd like. And they were able to use our little reporting wizard here on the right side to be able to quickly find the report they'd like. In this case, it's this user productivity report that's available for Zen app and Zen desktop. So it's not just one side or the other. So those of you who are leveraging, the different platforms with Citrix, we have you covered. So rather than go through and run one for you now, I think it'd be better if we actually give you a look at an example from Empire Office and show you exactly what this report looks like from their end. So you should be able to see my screen here.
From the process you just went through, it was pre-built. So basically you just have to schedule it.
Everything's canned, everything's out of the box, everything is pre-built. So it's literally just going through a scheduling utility and picking the person that you want to email to or how you want to have it run.
Okay.
So what we're looking at here is the end user productivity report, and this is really the theme of today's webinar. This report gave Empire Office the ability to see each of their users, all of their sessions, both active and historical, and see exactly how long they were connected in for, and more importantly, for their use case, they were able to report on how active this user was in their session. So I'll go through this. and we'll just do a little bit of page geography just so everyone knows what they're looking at here. So along at the top here, you're able to see total users, so the number of users on a specific time period, a day, a week, and then we're breaking out each individual user here on the left. So you can see the username, that user's IP address, confirming that they're working from home, how they connected in, so that they come through a NetScaler, knowing that they're external, the application server or VDI desktop that they were accessing, when they logged in, when they logged off. And then on the right side, here's the really deep information that this customer wanted. They saw duration, they saw interaction, so the amount of time this user was interacting or being productive within their session, inactivity, so the time that they were inactive. So this is different than that Citrix state designation. This is a true representation of interaction versus inactivity. To take it a step further, they're even able to see the maximum amount of time that their users were inactive. So were they taking long lunch breaks, for example? So you're able to see that, a roll up of percentage of interaction, and then what applications this specific user was using. And for this customer, this was really important because they were trying to understand not only if users were working, but they wanted to be able to support their end users and understand how their work habits were different. And what they learned were that users weren't working the normal 9 to 5. They weren't logging in at 8:45 or 9 a.m. and logging out at 5 p.m. They actually found that users were working more often, and they were working different hours. Maybe they had kids in school, and maybe they had to work around that schedule. So they were logging in later in the day and they were working till later in the day. So this information was extremely valuable for them, and allowed them to be able to understand and support their employees better as they work from home. And this type of information, we do want to make clear, is available for VMware Horizon View as well. So those of you who are not using Citrix and using VMware Horizon, we do have this data available here as well too. And this is just an example here. Very similar report, just the data is represented slightly different and rolled up in a little bit different way. Here's one for Citrix as well too. So as you can see, this tells a really, really great story about how active each individual user was, and for Empire Office filled a major need as everyone worked from home.
And Joe, we had a question come in on the chat. I'm just sort of trying to deconstruct it a little bit, and so I can ask it. So the question is, if you have one of these users, well, before we answer this question, I want to ask a specific question. You mentioned the interaction data piece of it and why they were so interested in it. Is that because they didn't trust, or they didn't think they could use the Citrix state designations that they could see in real time in places like Director and stuff like that? And is that why, or is it just because we can pull together here? Can you talk about that quickly? Sure.
For one, going back to what we talked about before, this report is out of the box. It comes here with the technology, shipped with the technology. We're automatically collecting the data. So very little work on their end. They didn't have to move columns around. Everything right here for them. And two, it comes down to accuracy and being able to look historically. So they're able to go back, Citrix, the state destination, is not able to go back and give you historical data. This is able, and for that matter, it's not available for Zen Desktop. So again, while we're showing you Zen App here, we're available for Zen App and Zen Desktop, had the historical data, and it's just frankly more accurate.
Right. So for folks that had Zen Desktop, they didn't have an option until now, really. And for folks that were doing published applications, for example, they essentially have data to go on now, because we're actually measuring true interaction time. Now, how do we get this information? We're not getting it from the same places. So is it because of deep integration? Isn't that how we're able to, we actually measure it organically in the traffic that's taking place in the sessions and protocol, right?
Right, we're able to get this, organically through our technology in a couple different ways. The technology obviously is a deep integration with Citrix and the ICA channels and protocol, as well as we leverage a lightweight intelligent agent as well too. That's really able to give us an exceptionally deep look into user activity and experience.
Yeah, and that's a pretty unique portion of this. If there's one diamond in the rough or one gem to pull out of this session, it's the fact that we can actually measure that and do that, right? Isn't that what really drives the use of all this data by folks like Empire?
Absolutely. All this data here that you're seeing is all driven by those end user experience data points that we're able to collect in the technology. So not only is it giving you interaction time and inactivity time, but it's giving IT a objective look at user experience to understand which users are having trouble and which ones aren't.
Yeah. All right, good. That's great. Okay, so the question that we did get asked was, can you determine if it's because of the user or if there's an actual IT issue? So I think that I think that's actually the logical evolution of this, which is, okay, you have users that are inactive or maybe are frustrated. Can we figure out why that is?
Yeah, and our technology gives you a couple of different options. So we obviously can use the real-time and historical session display to look at individual users and sessions like we showed before. You have all that great data, but we also have a number of other reports and dashboards within the technology that make it really easy for IT to come to conclusions and find out which users are actually experiencing issues and where are those issues coming from. And one of those that Empire's leveraged and a lot of our other customers have leveraged is this user experience scorecard that we're showing here. So along the left side, Empire was able to see their overall user experience score, and that score is calculated based upon Citrix industry standards. And for all of the objective and user experience data we're collecting, so things like ICA and network latency, things like ICA round trip time, showing you the overall depiction of how the users experience. For them, what was really important was this average connection speed metric. Since all those people were working from home, they're able to get an objective look into how that user's Wi-Fi was performing. And they saw as a whole, as you can see in this graph here, that the user connection speed from home was on a whole pretty good. However, they were able to see by scrolling down and looking at all the different users that many users were struggling with home Wi-Fi connections, and they were able to use the data to work with those users and help them upgrade their ISP or just change the way they were working from home in general. And the nice part about this report too, it's not just, again, real time, it's historical. You can look at a day, a week, a month, however long you'd like to keep the data. You can sort this. You can look at individual users. You can look by server, delivery group. It gives you pretty much all the options that you'd like from a sorting perspective.
So some folks may not be intimately familiar with a couple of these specific metrics because they don't have the solution now. But those metrics, basically, the things that you see on this page, basically fill in the rest of the gaps to tell you if there's a slowness issue, where and why, to marry that with productivity data. Is that a fair conclusion?
Right on.
Okay. Right. Okay, good. So this is a historical report that bubbles this up in a scorecard where you can see across the whole environment and get a degree of visibility. It is in the, we have the Christmas light colors in full effect. But what about, what if I actually want to look at, let's say, Harry Young, the first user on that list, okay? And I want to figure out why, or maybe we want to look at Cameron Ross at the bottom. Why is his network latency how can I drill into that in more detail? Because this is just a couple of metrics on the page.
Yeah, absolutely. And the technology, thankfully gives you the data to be able to do that. So the view that we're looking at is really more of the bigger picture. However, we're able to give you that micro view into user experience end to end that you're really not able to get anywhere else. So if we flip back over to the user session that we were looking at just before, again, this is from last Tuesday, this session, we're able to confirm that the user was having issues by seeing their high round trip time. We're able to see that network latency was also high, so that the network was obviously the bottleneck for this user. And we're able to see that that user's connection speed was significantly lower than what it should be. And IT is able to click into these. They're able to see these built-in data interpretation lines within the graphs that make it really easy for them to understand, was performance good? Was it bad? Was it horrible? And in this case here, we were able to see that, this user here, Harry, was having issues around 11 o'clock. That's when we saw round trip time the highest. And they also saw the user's connection at that same time was about 4.5 megabits per second, which is about half of what we recommend. So that's a really great, given the use case that we just mentioned as well too, how simple and easy it was for them with users working from home. They were able to use this information here to talk to the end user and explain to them that they simply don't have a good enough connection from home, and they were able to either have them, plug in directly, work closer to the router, kick other people off the network, all the stuff that we hear about every day.
Yeah, so this takes the IT equation and what drives the performance, slowness, response times, end-to-end into account. And there's a lot more data here as well with everything else that's knit or aligned to this session that's meaningful. A lot of infrastructure, tab, app server, hypervisor, host, etc. One of the things that we mentioned earlier on in the slides, Joe, was user behavior and actually getting, okay, well, if I want to understand what they were doing, maybe they were active, maybe they had to interaction time of half a day, let's say. What were they actually doing it? Were they doing the things I told them to do and that are relevant to their job? If you're
right.
from a user's point of view, can't we drill into that and get a lot of additional helpful detail around that too for more context if you need to go down that deep?
Yeah, so when we talk about deep integration, I think this is probably the part that I think is most helpful. So we talked about before about IC round trip time. You can tell right away that this was higher than what it should be. You can define it right here from the technology, which is pretty nice handy to have. But we're also able to get information like we talked about with connection speed and as well bandwidth utilization. So we're able to see how much bandwidth this end user was using from working from home. So with Empire Office, this is a furniture company. And the applications they're using via Citrix are your normal applications for Microsoft. They're using Microsoft Word, Microsoft Outlook. And one of the things they were able to see very clearly from the technology is that some of the network and bandwidth issues that were being reported actually had nothing to do with the infrastructure or the network itself. It had a lot to do with the users and the amount of bandwidth, or specifically the actions that they were taking within their session. So if we look at this example here, I can see around the time that this user was having issues, which we talked about around 10:50, 11 o'clock, they had 4 megabits worth of connection. Well, this user's using more than 2 megabits worth of bandwidth. So what were they doing within their session? I doubt that Microsoft Word or Excel is gonna take up that much bandwidth or suck that much bandwidth from their network. So that's when we're able to drill into the individual virtual channels that each user is accessing. So what Empire was able to see in this example here was some serious spikes here around that same exact time on the ICA channel. And they were able to see what is called thin wire bandwidth here. And for those of you who don't know that, I don't blame you. However, it is defined within the technology. And thin wire bandwidth is essentially telling you that this user, once it reaches a certain point, is 100% streaming audio or video. So in this case, they were able to see that thin wire bandwidth was using about 2 megabits worth of connection. When they called the end user and talked to them, it turned out that they were streaming a training during this time. That they were saying that they were having network issues and they were having problems using being productive, and this turned out to be the actual cause. So that's not the only one of these metrics we get. I mean, when we talk about deep integration, we're able to get each of the different virtual channels that Citrix needs and uses to be able to process these type of actions. Right. So you can see things like, were they streaming audio, video, were they, attempting to print something, large copy and paste job from Excel. These are all actions that have to go through Citrix to present on the screen, and we're able to show you how much bandwidth each of those are used.
Right, and they're all split out by generally, not exclusively by this, but generally by the different types of user behaviors, right? So a clipboard, keyboard, mouse, video, audio, and then inbound and outbound, and all those versions, they're all being tracked there. The reason I'm glad you went into that, because I think Empire Office was a good example of this as well as many other customers, which is users that, especially as a result of COVID, many users are working from home for the first time. They have never done it. Some folks have. Many folks have been working from home and remotely for some time. But for many organizations that have users that are perhaps less IT savvy than others, they don't know that doing certain things in a Citrix session shouldn't be expected, or they weren't able to provide the right user documentation because the IT wasn't able to because they sped up the rollout, something like that. This becomes really useful then in that situation, right, Joe? Because it's actually the only thing that can give you that kind of visibility to answer those kinds of questions of whether the user's doing it.
Data was able to give the IT team the ability to educate their end users, which is one of the things. And when we talked about how they wanted to support their end users, this is what we meant. They were able to educate the users on best practices working from home rather than working in the office. And those of you who are in IT and who are on today's call, you probably know that most users expect the same experience, whether they're home or whether they're working in the office, and that's just not the reality. 9 times out of 10, when people are working from home, they're using a different network, they have other people on the network. So the IT team at Empire Office was able to use this data that we're collecting to be able to have those good and productive conversations without the finger pointing or blaming on either side, and really help their users be more productive from home.
Right. So basically, you're saying that if you have a chronic addiction to opening up 1,000 Chrome tabs, that might not be conducive for good VDI performance, depending on how many YouTube videos you're playing in the background on those tabs. Yeah. Well, I think it's. I'm glad you took a minute to go into that question, Joe. Thanks for that. Okay, so finally, we have a couple minutes left here before we're going to wrap things up. And then we're going to have a quick Q&A here at the end of the session in a moment. But finally, what was the outcome? As you might have imagined, it went well. They were able to successfully. So if you think about this, Empire Office is the largest commercial furniture dealer in the United States. But that is traditionally more of a brick and mortar type of business. They were able to, as a result of this and the visibility they were able to get with the Goliath solution, when they went to roll out and transition from a entirely in the office to an entirely remote model, they were able to do so in a matter of months, which is a pretty remarkable statement given the nature of their business and their model. In addition to that, managers were actually able to do their jobs the right way. They were able to support the folks they needed to support, train the folks they needed to train, and then handle other situations appropriately with the benefit of data instead of having to rely on guesswork. And then ultimately, the distinction and the sort of tug and war with users around whether an issue was because, oh, it's slow today. That's why I'm just throwing up my hands as an end user versus just having to watch Netflix all day instead, as an example. That ambiguity completely disappeared, and so that tension point between employees and managers was, to everyone's relief, gone. So as a result, they were able to then achieve a lot of different things. And if you look at what the Michael says, who's the CIO and SVP over there that runs the IT department, they were able to fill in the gaps and answer the questions that they were asking, which is exactly what we were hoping. So I'll pause now real quickly, and I'll just take us through this last one. This is just a logo slide. I think a lot of enterprise IT companies have slides like this. If you're going to take one thing away from this, aside from the fact that we have some great customers, it's that You'll see large organizations with a lot of with large IT departments as well as small ones. You'll see ones that have larger IT budgets than others, but you'll recognize that they'll all use the Goliath because it has a price point and ease of use profile that allows that to happen. And as an out-of-the-box solution, it's pretty straightforward to be able to achieve that and realize those results. So, all right. Finally, we have Q&A. We have a couple questions that came in. We're going to take about the next 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll wrap things up. Thank you, everyone, for the questions that you did submit. Let me go quickly. One thing to note, by the way, there's a user story documenting exactly what Empire Office's experience was around this. They have some really good quotes and examples in there, many of which we've talked about today, but they really go into a lot of detail with their own words. So I'd recommend that you take a look at that if you're interested. There'll be available a link to that video I was talking about from Citrix, where they recommend the use of this kind of solution to solve both potentially performance issues as well as these kinds of concerns about supporting your remote users. Okay, couple of questions here that have come in. 1 second, I just lost my mouse. There we go. Okay. First question, Joe, was how do you get the actual data? I think you kind of covered this a little bit earlier. Can you just quickly?
Sure. So the technology has deep integration with Citrix through a number of APIs, as well as with the underlying infrastructure. And we do utilize a very lightweight intelligent agent that would be deployed on both your Citrix infrastructure servers as well as your VDAs.
Mm-hmm. But does not rely on Director, right? I mean, that's part of the allure here, part of the value.
Because the technology is no dependence on Director, receiver version, NetScaler, AppFlow. It's completely agnostic to those different technologies.
Good. Okay. This tab keeps. There we go. Do I need to run? The next question is: do I need to run scripts to get the data? And if so, then how can you track this historically? We don't use script. We don't need scripts to gather any of our data, right, Joe?
Because we can use scripts to
collected and kept.
Right. We can use scripts to perform some automated tasks. However, all the data that you're seeing in the technology that we've showed, and we've showed on whether it's some of the graphs or the reports, that's all pulled out of the box. Does not require any scripting like some other third-party products do. Everything is completely out of the box, and it does it for you. The technology ships with that embedded intelligence and automation.
Now we can run scripts as a part of self-healing and stuff like that, right? But that's usually more in solving an issue instead of actually having to collect the data around it.
Yeah, the way that our technology uses scripts is slightly different. We don't use scripts to collect data. We use scripts to be able to automate actions that our IT professionals would otherwise have to do manually. So like
otherwise you would be in the same boat with like Director then, where you only can see some information in real time, right? And then, but don't have access to anything historically. In the same way, you'd have to be, if you're relying on scripts, you have to run the script when the user's there, or while the session is active and what have you, before you lose your footing and your information go on, right?
Correct.
Okay, right. Okay, next question. This keeps disappearing. Okay, let's keep this up here. All right, next question is, you addressed this one. Can I look at an individual session, and if so, know whether it is good or bad? You were in the session display, Joe, and you spent some time in there explaining how there's actually just built-in lines, best practice lines on the graphs, right? So you don't even have to know really much about the details and inner workings of Citrix for the ISA protocol or anything like that. You just have to know that it's over the line. It's kind of very shapes and colors based troubleshooting, but it's effective.
And for those level 1, level 2 help desk, it makes it abundantly clear and easy to understand what good performance looks like and what bad performance looks like. So these lines are built into each of the graphs. This one's for round trip time, but Citrix recommends anything over 400 milliseconds is really poor, and a user is then experiencing latency. So we could see at certain times in this user session it exceeds that. So I don't need to guess whether or not this is bad or good performance. It shows me it right here. And in addition to that, we also have these help articles within each of the parts of the different product as well too, that I can click on, and it is specific to the page that you're on. So this one is on this one summary screen here. It defines everything on the page, shows you exactly what you're looking at, and ultimately, how you can use that to troubleshoot and obviously save some time.
That's great. So it's not just data, it marries you with the ability to interpret it and a lot of backup there. Okay, good. I know the training we provide along with this as well goes a long way when you're troubleshooting too, since we always include that. Next question was, do we support Citrix Cloud? Easy answer is yes. So all the data information we've been covering applies both on-premise and traditional models of Citrix as well as Citrix Cloud. And then the last question is, how can you share reports? I think you sort of showed a pre-run report after you switched over from the. Can you just explain how you can share that data and formats and methods you can do that?
Yeah, using the reporting wizard that we had showed before makes it really easy. And the nice thing is, in Empire Office used this. They were able to send this automatically via email, and you can attach it as a PDF or a CSV file if you wanted to other business line managers. So their director of HR, director of sales, marketing, and they were able to send these reports out daily, monthly, and it's all scheduled. So IT is not having to come in here and grab the data on demand, or what they can if people ask for it, but they're able to schedule these reports and manage them all right from the technology. It makes it really easy.
Right, and they can filter them down, right? So they can run it on subsets of the users.
They can run it on a specific user, group of users. It's basically allows you to customize it however you'd like.
Right, and even beyond, even on top of that, I mean, we also have pre-built templates for use of our data in kind of the leading reporting and Power BI products, like Microsoft Power BI and Tableau. We even have some Excel ones as well. So that data can be really easily plugged in and consumed in a number of different technologies, even if it's not going to be in our console itself. Just so that you can realize the benefits of that and consume it with graphs and things of that nature to help you draw conclusions from it quickly. Okay, so that's actually the last question I have here, Joe. I want to quickly thank everyone for coming to today's session. We are obviously we're taking everything day by day, week by week, as we continue to navigate the normal culture and phenomena that's taking place in America, both at a corporate and personal level. And so I hope today's session was useful in helping understand what options were available to help solve and fill some of these gaps, which to some have actually turned out to be very meaningful towards how they handle and adapt to this kind of thing, like a global pandemic, going forward. So again, thank you for everyone. I'll close with this. If you'd like to get to access the technology, you'd like to try it out, we provide personalized demonstrations, as well as a free 30-day trial. We also offer a reporting. We also offer remote monitoring and reporting services as well. So you don't necessarily have to buy software, really. You can just ask for a different format where you can leverage the benefits of this data in a number of different ways, but perhaps leverage the Goliath team in a little bit more of a hands-on way to accomplish that instead of buying a software product. So you have a number of options there. We'd be happy to talk about them further, depending on your level of interest. You see the email address at the bottom. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And I want to thank everyone again for coming. Reminder, there will be a survey quickly when we shut this down. and you'll also get a recording of today's session in your inbox automatically. I think it's within 24 to 48 hours, I believe. So, okay. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.